Well, thinking about rest today, how many of you get as much rest as you'd like? Show of hands, get all the rest you need. Good job, Jim. There aren't a lot. I didn't see a lot of hands in the room. I was looking for jokes that have to do with sleep or sleeplessness, and you'd be amazed how many jokes there are about not being able to sleep out there. Lots and lots of them. Here's one I got kind of related to, because I don't always sleep well. And I like to tell Joe about it. You know? Here's this. After years of work, our research team has uncovered yet another devastating side effect of sleep deprivation. Thinking other people care about how much sleep you got last night. That's true. They really don't. This one is kind of funny. Conversation between me and my brain. Me, let me sleep. Brain, no, let's stay awake and remember every stupid decision you've made in your life. Me, okay. This one I can relate to. I finally got 8 hours of sleep. It took me 4 days, but whatever. My bed is a magical place where I suddenly remember everything I forgot to do. I can relate to that as well. And finally this one. The best thing to say if you ever get caught falling asleep at work, raise your head slowly and say, "In the name of Christ, amen." Good cover. Good cover. It gives the impression there's so many jokes out there that there's a lot of us with some challenges when it comes to rest and sleep. And I think that's true, and I can relate to it myself. And it's really a deep spiritual principle, rest. I come back to it again and again. And rediscover my own need for it again and again, and what that means for me. Rest is a critical vehicle of soul nourishment we must have, and yet we get away from it, and our culture doesn't always encourage it, and we have to kind of remember again and again how important it is. I saw some statistics from the National Institutes of Health that said about 33% of the general population suffers sleep disruption. A third of us. That's kind of amazing. We forget that rest is not doing nothing. Rest is doing something. It's meaningful, important, renewing activity in us, in body, mind, spirit, and it's deeply important. We're really doing something important when we actually rest, let ourselves rest. And that must be why it's been emphasized so much in spiritual teachings, in all faith traditions. We've got it big time in the Christian tradition. In the Old Testament, it's part of the creation story, that God rested. There's creation, and rest is a part of that. You create, you rest. And I think we're meant to understand that as part of all creation. Rest is a critical part of that. And in Exodus 20, there's the Hebrew law about the Sabbath day. It's based on that idea. It's part of the creation process. God rested. We rest. Creator rests in us. We need to rest. Exodus 28 says, "Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. You shall not do any work." It's like spiritual law giving you permission. Goof off. It's important. Do not do any work. That needs to be a part of every week, a part of your life. Jesus taught it very strongly, and he drew people to him with this promise of rest, and with what he modeled about how to work and rest, always this rhythm. "Come to me, all you that are weary and are carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest." That still resonates strongly, I think. People needed rest as much then as now, I have a feeling. He said, "Take my yoke upon you, my discipline, and you will find rest for your souls. My yoke is easy and my burden is light." I think he's talking about his discipline was one of regular communion with God. He went off on mountains to pray, and then he came down and served in the marketplace or the temple. Sometimes he prayed all night in gardens or on mountaintops, and then he resumed his work. There was this rhythm of solitude and service, of activity and of rest. He modeled that, and that was the discipline he was teaching. Rest is certainly an integral part of the natural world, and we're a part of that, all living things. Here in the Midwest, North America, we are busy preparing for that seasonal period of rest called winter. And we're beginning to see signs of that. There's the last gathering up of the harvest, storing up some things. The chipmunks are busily taking all the nuts below ground, the woodchucks, preparing for a season of rest, of renewal. And winter is important for everything to renew and refresh so that we will have a beautiful spring and growing season next year. I was doing some reading, and I'd like to know more about it, about the circadian rhythm that's integral to all living things, all life, in plants, trees, fish, birds, animals of all kinds, in us, deeply woven into us. It's part of our creation, are these circadian rhythms, they call them, of recognizing light and dark and acting, living according to that rhythm. Cycles of sleep and activity we're meant to be guided by and to live by. Even where we are on the earth, our orientation, the birds of the air use that in migration. Their circadian rhythm has to do with where they are, how they can locate themselves in space. We're gifted with, by creation, with this wonderful internal rhythm, which is a rhythm of rest and activity, of quiet and work, a rhythm of it. We can choose kind of not to live in accordance with that deep circadian rhythm in us, and we override it a lot by just choosing not to. I'm not going to take a break. I'm not going to rest. I've got too much to do. Anyone ever think that? Can't do it. Can't take rest today. And so we can override free will to neglect our circadian rhythm, but it doesn't go away. It comes from creation, and it's a part of us. And if we just decide to kind of rest in that and follow our own deep intuition, that innate ability will still be there to guide us. It's meant to keep us healthy, whole, and well. That's why we have it. And it's a rhythm of rest and work. I think it's interesting to think about people who love music and art and things like that. Rest is integral to all creative processes, isn't it? Think about rest and music. They're so critical. You've got to have those periods of no sound in order for the periods of sound to have emphasis and have power. That's true in all musical. It's true in dance. It's not constant frenetic movement. There's also stillness. We'll do some interpretive dance right now, shall we? I've always enjoyed interpretive dance. There has to be stillness for the motion to be compelling. It's a rhythm between activity and stillness. I was reading a passage by a guy who writes musical scores for movies. His name is Oscar Castro-Neves. And he talks about how when he puts together scores for movies, it's a very common pattern for it to be a big build-up crescendo music in a scene and then down to nothing, down to silence. And then anything said in that silence has tremendous power. It has more emphasis. And he says that's a really common pattern they use again and again in musical scores for movies. And I was thinking, well, that's true in any kind of public speaking or oration. There's got to be that rhythm. There's got to be some high energy speaking and then silence. And he was talking about a great example of that with Martin Luther King Jr.'s most famous speech where he says, "Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty we're free at last." I mean, the pauses in there give it the power. It's amazing how the importance of a rest in creative expression of all kinds. So we know, I see heads nodding, we all know this, and we know rest is important. We know we need it physically. We know the circadian rhythm of rest is built into us. We've probably overridden it sometimes and suffered for it, would you agree? We pushed ourselves too far and suffered for that. And then it catches up with us, and then we have to kind of try to get back there by opening ourselves up to rest again. But I think it's useful to reflect on what blocks our ability to rest, what interferes with our ability to rest. One of them is this inability to stop working. to stop doing. And it's interesting to think about where that comes from. I think there's a bit of an addiction to it in our culture, an addiction to overdoing, to being over busy, to multitasking, to doing too much. Wayne Muller, in this book I've been reading about the Sabbath, he talks about there's a sense of artificial urgency. Artificial urgency. And I thought, that resonates with me. What's so urgent about me getting to the bottom of that to-do list? Where does this come from? This artificial urgency in workplaces. Everything's got to be done now. It's so critical. Really? I think it could probably wait till tomorrow. Almost all this stuff. Can't we set it aside? I think there's ego involved in this inability to stop. There's this egoic sense that our efforts are so important, we can't stop until all our work is done. It's so important. The trouble with that is our work is never done. It's really never done. If you wait to rest until you get to the bottom of the to-do list and all the work that you wanted to do is done, you won't get there. And so you'll be putting off that rest and that renewal again and again until you're getting into difficult straits. You're getting away from your internal rhythm of rest, and it may catch up with you. So we need to kind of remind ourselves, we can always stop our tasks till tomorrow, can't we? Can't they all be shelved for a while? And I really love that about the Jewish Sabbath. Has always been that a very clear thing, that the Sabbath starts at sundown on Friday, whether that's 4:30 in the winter or 9:30 in the summer. It starts at sundown. You put your pen down or turn off your computer. You go home from work and you prepare for rest. That's the Jewish Sabbath, sundown Friday to sundown Saturday. And it's meant to be a period of rest and renewal and spending time with loved ones, not working. You are to set your work aside. No work is to be done on the Sabbath. I love that. There's a kind of humility. There's a kind of humility in that. No matter what I'm doing, it's not that important. The world is going to continue to spin. I can set it aside at sundown and take a break. There's a kind of surrender to that I think is a very healthy thing. Surrendering to that natural rhythm of life, and we all need rest. It's part of the fabric of creation. We need to honor that and surrender to that and not say, no, I'm pushing it through because what I'm doing is so important. So important. We can set it aside. We can set it aside. I think there's sometimes a kind of hypervigilance that sets in. Like we have to be continually vigilant. We can't stop internally. And I mean vigilant with our stressful thoughts. How many of us have lain awake at night with worrisome thoughts, stressful thoughts we can't turn off? It's a kind of hypervigilance. Like if we're afraid if we stop, something bad will happen. Things are going to fly out of control if we stop worrying about them. That somehow our worry is propping things up. It's crazy, really. It's crazy thinking. Of course we can set it aside, and the more we set it aside, the better able we'll be to rest and be renewed for the next day's exertions. Everything can be set aside. It takes a toll on us. And at times when we are particularly in the grip of that kind of hypervigilance and stress and hyperactivity, I think we could probably all remember times like that and the toll it took on us. I was remembering a time years ago, out of college, I wanted to live in a big city and moved to New York City for a year or so. I've shared stories from that weird time in my life before, I think. But one of the things that I was really struck by in that period was that it was such a hyperactive period and hypervigilant, and every moment was like, what do I need to do next? It's like find a job, find an apartment, do this, do that, acquire belongings, possessions, everything. Constant vigilance. I wasn't getting really any rest. Wasn't monitoring any inner rhythm at all. And I was terribly distracted all that time until I began to settle into some kind of a daily rhythm. But one of the odd things I discovered about that period is that I don't remember much of anything from that period. I remember my friend who I was living with in New York for a while mentioning, oh, don't you remember we read that book, that time we went to that play, we did this, we did that. I remember nothing. I remember nothing. I think because distraction had taken over my mind so thoroughly. Those are like those books I read. I didn't remember a thing from them until I began to get back in that natural rhythm again. Have you ever had a time like that in your life where you were so busy you really hardly remember your life at that time? That's a toll. That's taken a toll. It's taken us out of the flow of our ability to even enjoy being alive. Rest is very, very important. I think something else that works against us a little bit, and it's good for us to reflect on a little bit, is there are cultural values that impact us. Cultural values of doing a lot, being very busy, as like a good thing. Like it's a good thing to be very, very busy. I remember somebody telling me that, it's a little bit of a joke, but they ask you at an employment interview about your biggest fault. It's what you should say. Well, I just work too hard. I know when to set it aside. I overwork. Yeah. Well, we got a cultural value for that. Like it's a good thing. We have cultural values having to do with progress and development. And sometimes I don't even think we know what we mean by that. Sometimes it means being hyper busy. It means construction. It means fundraising. It means filling the empty spaces in nature instead of leaving some empty place for life to thrive. I think more and more people are beginning to awaken to, a reflection on we need emptiness, we need quiet places. And to begin to question some of the cultural values that sometimes we're sort of subject to them without even being aware. Is that really progress? Development of what? We need to reflect on these things and see if our choices and our values are in alignment with that. Well, so here are some strategies for taking rest in chaotic times. And I'm drawing a lot from a lovely book I've been reading by Wayne Mueller called Sabbath. If this is all true, that we need rest more than ever, that we're, so many of us, not getting enough of it, and we need it. We need to stay healthy and well and to be able to think clearly and make good choices and to be creative, and I think all those things are true. What are some ways we can do it, even in the midst of really busy lives and confusing times? So one of them is find a way to practice Sabbath every day. Find a way to practice Sabbath every day. So many of our faith traditions have this built into their practice. Muslim prayer practice, 5 daily times of prayer. They ring bells 5 times a day. Sabbath moments punctuate the day. In Catholicism, I think this goes way back. Writer I'm fond of, Brother David Stendhal Rast. He grew up in Austria, and all over his native Austria, he talked about the Angelus bells, bells of the angels, the Angelus bells rising from church steeples at dawn, high noon, and before dark. Kind of similar to the Muslim approach. Then those 3 times a day, you're meant to pause for a moment of prayer, and then resume your activities 3 times a day. He says years later, he still honors that rhythm. He's in his 80s now. He says, I let the silence drop like a pebble into the middle of my day and send its ripples out over its surface in ever-widening circles. I like that. In the middle of the day, in the middle of whatever, you hear a bell, or maybe you hear a phone, or maybe you just decide this is going to be the moment when you do it, but you let a pebble drop in the middle of your day and send out some ever-widening circles while you come to rest for a moment. I was reading about Thich Nhat Hanh, who has a place in France called Plum Village. It's been a kind of a retreat and a refuge for people to go and practice, deepen their spirituality for years and years. I think he's there recovering from a stroke even now. But for years and years, he was the one who would ring several times a day the mindfulness bell at Plum Village. Just at different times during the day, ring that bell. And again, this is out of Buddhist practice, same idea. Anyone within the hearing of the bell was to pause and take 3 conscious breaths. Let's take a big breath right now, why don't we? That can be a Sabbath, just in that kind of moment, just like that. just take a moment of rest and then continue your activities. I think we can seize spontaneous mini Sabbath moments like that through the day. If we just choose to take a breath like that, drop a pebble in the middle of our day. And we can do that at any time. I was driving to the church this past week for a board meeting in the evening and I drove by somebody mowing their lawn. And I was thinking to myself, well, I'm not going to be smelling that too much longer probably, that smell of freshly mown grass. Isn't that a wonderful smell? Mm-hmm. And it just wafted in the car windows and I just kind of inhaled it deeply. That sweet smell of grass. And I thought, that's a mini Sabbath moment. You take a moment like that to inhale a fragrance from something, or to pet your canine friend, or smell that dog smell. Dog lovers in the room, you know what I'm talking about. That lovely dog smell, or just the sunshine coming through the trees. Whenever something strikes you, your senses, to take a moment with that and kind of breathe it in. That can be a Sabbath. That can be a Sabbath moment that can be deeply refreshing. Wayne Mueller, in his book Sabbath, he talks about taking a Sabbath walk. I thought that was a nice idea, take a Sabbath walk. He mentioned some South American tribe that they were nomadic and they had a habit of like walking for several days, but then they would pause, set up camp, and stay put for 2 days to let their souls catch up with them. I love that idea. We need to do that. So he talks about a Sabbath walk, meaning take like half an hour to take a little walk somewhere, preferably in nature. It could be just around your own yard or neighborhood or at a park. And it's not a hike, it's not a workout, it's just a little walk. And anything that strikes your fancy, that you're interested in, you can pick something up or look closely at something. And then move on, very leisurely, more like an amble. That's a Sabbath walk. Totally unhurried. And do that for half an hour and then see how you feel. Maybe your soul catches up with you a little bit. I think it does. Talked about breath meditation for just a few more minutes. There's nothing more basic to this rhythm of rest and exertion than inhaling and exhaling. You're doing it as you breathe. You're inhaling, so pause, and then you empty. Emptiness and rest, and then inhaling again. You do that a few times, and it works on you. You begin to feel a little of that Sabbath rest working on you. And again, it's without effort or exertion. You just watch the breath come in and out. Just a few. And then I like this idea. He talked about using prayer. He called it the portable Sabbath. Prayer as a portable Sabbath, that whenever we close our eyes for a moment and affirm a truth, a high truth, or have a feeling of gratitude, let it fill us, that's a portable Sabbath. That gives our souls a kind of rest. It only takes a moment. In Unity, we're very fond of affirmations, positive statements. And we'll select ones often that are exactly the ones we need right now, that we may not be feeling spontaneously or not wanting to remind ourselves of. But to take a moment and say an affirmation and close our eyes and just hold it in the quiet for a moment before moving on with your day can be a powerful, portable Sabbath experience. I am one with the power and presence of God. In a time of weakness or indecision, I am one with the power and presence of God. Let's say that together. Close your eyes. I am one with the power and presence of God. And just breathe that for a moment. And rest in that idea for a moment. Amen. Portable Sabbath. We can take that kind of Sabbath with us anywhere. Anytime. We take a moment to breathe, to say an affirmation or a little prayer. Anytime we pause to feel gratitude for the smell of grass or the aroma of a flower or somebody's good cooking or whatever it might be, we are practicing the Sabbath. And we are reaping the benefits of the Sabbath that rest our souls. So So here's my affirmation for the week, if you care to join me in it. I take my rest in the midst of creation, and I am deeply nourished. Together? I take my rest in the midst of creation, and I am deeply nourished. So it is. Amen.